I was discharged from surgery. My parents called to say they were at the mall for my sister's birthday. I took a taxi home, called the bank, and removed her from my life insurance. Then she called to ask about the policy. The nurse was still adjusting my discharge bracelet when my phone rang. I saw my mother's name on the screen and felt something unknot in my chest. That specific relief that only exists when you've been alone and in pain, and you finally hear from someone who is supposed to love you. I answered before the second ring. "Hi," I said, and even to my own ears, my voice sounded smaller than usual, raw. The kind of voice that comes after a bad night and 2 hours of surgical anesthesia. "Are you close?" "I'm at the main entrance." My mother's voice came through bright, distracted, with that particular texture it gets when she's standing in a crowded place. And the conversation she's having with me is a minor interruption to the one she's actually having in the room. "Sweetheart, we're at Brookside Mall." The words made no sense. I moved them around in my head, looking for the version that fit the situation. Maybe she was passing through. Maybe my father was circling in the parking garage and found none. "What?" "The bakery delayed Tessa's order, and your father had to find the specific candles she wanted. The ones shaped like little stars. She saw them on Pinterest." A pause. The sound of a department store speaker in the background. "You'll have to take a bus." I was standing at the distance discharge exit of St. Luke's Regional Medical Center in Lexington, Kentucky. I had 3 stitches in my lower abdomen. I was holding a paper bag that contained 4 prescription bottles and 14 pages of post-surgical care instructions. The nurse beside me was pretending to look at her clipboard. "Mom," I said carefully, "I just had surgery." "And you're fine," she said. "They discharged you. That means you're fine. Fine is what they tell people who survive. It doesn't mean comfortable. It doesn't mean capable of standing without wincing or lifting a grocery bag or absorbing the information that your parents are buying star-shaped birthday candles while you figure out how to get home with stitches in your stomach." "Tessa only turns 26 once," my mother added. "Don't make this about you." She said it the way you say something you've said 1,000 times before. Not meanly. That's the part that's always hardest to explain. Not with malice, with exhaustion, with the tired authority of a woman who has long since decided which of her daughters requires more management and adjusted her attention accordingly. I hung up quietly, not out of anger, because I knew if I stayed on the line another 10 seconds, I would cry in front of the nurse, and women like me are trained from birth to never do that in public. I sat down on the bench outside the exit. I counted to 30. Then I called a taxi. My name is Maryno Reddit. I'm 31 years old, the older of 2 daughters, and I have spent the better part of my adult life being what my family needed me to be. Dependable, accommodating, and quiet enough about it that nobody had to feel uncomfortable. I work as a mid-level procurement analyst for a regional healthcare network, which sounds boring and is in the best possible way. I am organized. I am precise. I plan 6 weeks ahead on a shared digital calendar, and have never once in my professional life missed a deadline. I own a narrow 2-story townhouse in a neighborhood with mature trees and a HOA that sends passive-aggressive letters about lawn height in August. I mention all of this because it matters later. Because people who are built like me, systematically, deliberately, without a lot of drama, don't make emotional decisions. We make decisions after we've processed all the available information, and then we act on them with the same calm we'd bring to a quarterly spreadsheet. That's important. Because what I did that afternoon, sitting on my couch with ice on my abdomen and my laptop balanced on a throw pillow, was not emotional. It was the final logical step in a calculation I had been ignoring for years. My sister Tessa is 3 years younger than me, which means she is 25 years old and has been charming, helpless, and expensive in roughly equal measure for as long as I can remember. I don't say this with cruelty. I say it because it is precisely and demonstrably true. At 16, she broke her laptop in what was described as an accident involving a dropped drink, and I, who had been saving for a camera, bought her a replacement because our parents said it wasn't fair to make her fall behind in school. At 22, she met a man named Derek with a motorcycle and a vague plan to do music, and I co-signed an apartment lease for the two of them because she said she needed stability, and our parents said, family helps family. Derek lasted 7 months. The lease lasted 2 years. I fielded 3 calls from the landlord and absorbed a $600 penalty when she broke it. At 29, she needed a partial dental crown because she'd stopped going to her checkups for 3 years. I paid $740 of it. She said she'd pay me back. Nodded like this was already settled. Tessa never paid me back. She never had to. Because in our family, money flows toward Tessa the way water flows downhill, naturally, inevitably, and with no particular expectation of return. She is the one who cries prettily when things are difficult. She is the one our mother calls first and worries about longest. She is, in the architecture of our family, the one who matters most visibly. I was the infrastructure, reliable, load-bearing, invisible in the way structural things always are until they crack. The surgery had been unexpected. I'd gone to urgent care on a Wednesday evening after 2 days of pain in my lower right abdomen that I'd been quietly hoping was a muscle strain from a weekend hike. Dr. Priya Nair, 7 years in emergency medicine, the kind of physician who delivers bad news with the precise, efficient compassion of someone who has done it thousands of times, took one look at my ultrasound results and said I needed to be transferred to St. Luke's immediately. What had started as a minor ovarian cyst had become, in the space of a few weeks, an acute situation requiring laparoscopic surgery before it ruptured. "You waited too long," she said, not unkindly. I had. I always did. I'd been raised by people who characterized pain as inconvenience and inconvenience as selfishness, and I had absorbed that lesson so thoroughly I'd spent 2 days walking around with an abdomen that was actively trying to kill me. The surgery was performed the following morning by Dr. James Whitmore, general surgeon, who had the mild, steady affect of a man who had seen everything and been surprised by nothing since approximately 1987. He came to my room afterward, sat on the edge of the visitor's chair, and told me it had gone smoothly. The cyst had been removed cleanly. I had 3 external stitches, and I should expect soreness and fatigue for the next 2 weeks minimum. "No heavy lifting," he said. "Nothing over 10 pounds. No driving for 48 hours. Rest," I nodded. "Is someone picking you up?" he asked. "Yes," I said, because I still believe that. The taxi driver was a quiet man in his late 40s, who asked if I needed help with my bag and didn't say anything when I winced getting into the back seat. He asked once, at a red light, if I was doing okay. I said yes. He nodded and didn't ask again, which was the kindest thing anyone did for me that day. He dropped me at my townhouse at 3:22 p.m. I tipped him $50 on a $12 ride because small dignities matter. Inside, I locked the door, took the antibiotics and the mild painkiller, and lowered myself onto the couch with the careful deliberation of a woman who has been advised not to engage her core muscles unnecessarily. I put ice wrapped in a dish towel on my abdomen. I stared at the ceiling, which needed repainting, and which I had been meaning to repaint for 2 years. Then I thought about the life insurance policy. I had taken out the policy 6 years earlier when I bought the townhouse. 20-year term, $250,000 payout. It was sensible. I had a mortgage. I had no partner, And if something happened to me, I wanted there to be a financial solution rather than a financial problem. My parents had been present for that conversation, sitting in my dining room, which still smelled like new paint, and they had suggested firmly, the kind of suggestion that doesn't leave much room, that Tessa should be the beneficiary. "She's your sister," my mother said. "She's family." "What about you and Dad?" I asked. "We'll be fine," my father said in a tone that meant, "Tessa won't be." I named her, because I was 25 and I still believed that family was a value that ran in both directions. I still believed that the woman who would receive $250,000 in the event of my death was also the woman who might, in the event of my surgery, show up with soup. I had been wrong about that. I picked up the phone and called my insurance agent. His name was Tom Garrity, and he'd been managing my policy since I signed it. Thorough, professional, the kind of man who follows up on emails within 4 hours, he answered on the second ring. "My Aaron," he said, "what can I do for you?" "I need to change my beneficiary," I said. There was a brief pause. "Of course. Is everything all right?" "Everything's fine," I said. And this time, I let the word mean exactly what it meant when my mother used it. He walked me through the process. I would need to submit a written request with my policy number, the new beneficiary's information, and my signature. The change would be processed within 5 to 7 business days and would take effect immediately upon confirmation. "Who would you like to name?" he asked. "My cousin," I said, "Leah Calloway." Leah was 34, a physical therapist, and the woman who had arrived at my townhouse that morning before I was even discharged, with a bag of groceries, a container of soup from the deli on Maple Street, a fresh set of sheets, and a complete plan for managing my recovery. She had texted me at 7 a.m. to say she'd cleared her afternoon caseload. She had texted my surgeon's office to ask for a copy of my post-operative instructions so she could read them in advance. She had, when she arrived at the hospital and found me already discharged and in a taxi, sent me a voice message that was 30 seconds long and consisted mostly of the specific kind of quiet fury that bypasses volume entirely. She had earned this. "Done," Tom said. "I'll send the paperwork to your email within the hour." When we hung up, I put the phone down on the couch cushion beside me. I did not feel guilty. I felt like I had finally updated a document to reflect the truth. My cousin Leah arrived at 4:45. She came in with her spare key, the only other person who had one, set the grocery bag on the counter, and stood in the doorway to the living room, looking at me on the couch for a long moment. "Your parents called me," she said, "to ask if I could pick you up since they were busy." I looked at her. "They called me," she repeated, "to ask if I could do the thing they should have done. Did you go? You were already in the taxi." She crossed the room and sat in the chair across from me, elbows on her knees. "Maren, talk to me." So I did. I told her about the phone call, about my mother's voice, bright, distracted. "You'll have to take a bus." About my father getting on the line to say, "Don't make a scene as if grief over abandonment is a scene and not a reasonable human response to a specific sequence of events." Leah has a therapist's quality of listening, even though she's not one. That particular stillness that doesn't rush to fix things, just holds space for them to exist and be real. She let me talk. She didn't say anything horrible had happened to me. She didn't minimize or redirect or suggest I might be reading too much into it. She said, "You've been reading too little into it for a long time." "I know," I said. "You called the insurance company," she said. It wasn't a question. Before you got here, something in her expression shifted. Not surprise, but recognition, like she had been waiting for this particular decision for longer than I had. "Good," she said quietly. She made soup. She changed my ice pack. She set my medications on the side table with a written schedule. She stayed until 9 o'clock and made me promise to call if anything felt wrong during the night. When she left, I signed the beneficiary change form on my laptop, attached the required documentation, and sent it to Tom Garrity's office. Then I slept for 11 hours. 3 days passed. The stitches ached with a persistent low insistence that made everything. Getting up, sitting down, laughing, sneezing. A small, careful negotiation. I worked from home in 3-hour blocks, ate the soup Leah had left, and watched the family group chat for signs of life. My mother texted on day 1, "Hope you're feeling better. Tessa had such a wonderful birthday dinner. You really should have been there." My father texted on day 2, "Let us know when you're back on your feet." Tessa did not text until day 3. "Are you coming Sunday?" "Mum says you're acting weird." Sunday was Tessa's birthday dinner, the formal sit-down restaurant version of a celebration that had apparently required balloons, a delayed custom cake, star-shaped candles, and the physical presence of both parents on the day their older daughter was discharged from a surgery. I read the text. I put the phone face down on the couch. I thought about the 11 years I had been the reliable one, the years of co-signed leases and covered dental bills and showing up, always showing up, regardless of what was happening in my own life, because family helps family, and I was supposed to be fine. I thought about how I had been sitting outside a hospital entrance for 25 minutes, waiting for a ride that was never coming. I did not go on Sunday. I did not reply. By Monday morning, my voicemail was full. 3 messages from my mother, each increasing in volume and decreasing in coherence. 2 from my father, both carrying that particular flavor of male disappointment that dresses itself as reason. And 1 from Tessa, time-stamped at 9:47 p.m. on Sunday. I listened to hers last. "You humiliated me," she said. Her voice had that quality it always had when she felt wronged. Slightly high, slightly breathless, the sound of someone who has never been required to manage their own emotions, and so is perpetually underprepared when they surge. "Mom said it was a small stomach thing. You could have come if you'd wanted to. Everyone was asking where you were. A small stomach thing. That's what they'd told people. Not minor surgery, not even procedure. A small stomach thing, the verbal equivalent of brushing crumbs off a table. Managed, minimized, rewritten, so that my absence could be explained as petulance rather than physics. I sat with that for a while. I am a procurement analyst. My entire job is identifying discrepancies between what something is labeled and what it actually contains. I have never been especially good at ignoring those discrepancies in spreadsheets, and I was discovering, at 31, sitting on a couch with 3 stitches and a voicemail full of people upset that I hadn't celebrated my own abandonment, that I was no longer especially good at ignoring them in my life either. Then Tessa said, "Mum wanted me to ask you something about your insurance." I replayed it twice. She had started planning her future around my death, not maliciously. Tessa has never been malicious. That would require the kind of deliberate self-awareness she's never had to develop. But she had, at some point in the last 6 years, factored my life insurance into her understanding of her own financial safety net. She had told someone, or had been told, that she was my beneficiary. She had let that settle into the furniture of her future. I called her back. "You're not my beneficiary anymore," I said. "I changed it." Silence. Then, "You changed it? Over one misunderstanding?" "No," I said, because I finally understood. My mother arrived at my door the next morning at 8:15, unannounced. She is a woman of 61 who has spent decades being warmly, generously devoted to her family in the selective way that some people practice religion, fervently, visibly, and with significant blind spots about who the devotion actually serves. She has an answer for everything. She has context for every decision. She is, in her own understanding of herself, a good mother. And she is not entirely wrong. She was present at school plays. She made birthday cakes from scratch. She attended parent-teacher conferences. She just had a hierarchy. And I had spent 31 years politely pretending not to notice. She stood in my doorway in her winter coat and said, without greeting me, without looking at my abdomen or asking about my stitches, "How could you do something so cruel to your sister?" Not "how are you?" Not "are you healing?" Just Tessa. I stepped back and let her in because I had things to say, and I wanted to say them clearly. She sat at my kitchen table. I made coffee. The domesticity of it, the familiar ritual of cups and spoons, and the coffee maker gurgling, seemed to disarm her slightly, or at least give her pause. "I had surgery," I said. "You were at the mall buying balloons." She flushed. "We had commitments." "You had 2 daughters," I said. "One of them needed a ride home from the hospital. We didn't know it was serious." "You didn't ask," I said. "You sent a thumbs-up emoji." She pivoted immediately. I watched her do it. The smooth conversational turn away from the things she couldn't answer, to the insurance policy, to Tessa, to the cruelty of removing a sister from a document she'd been named in for 6 years. "That money was supposed to be for her future," she said. "It's my money," I said. "It only exists if I die, and I am choosing who receives it." "Family receives it," she said, with the tone of someone reciting a law. "Leah is family," I said. My mother looked at me like I had spoken in a language she didn't recognize. "Leah picked me up," I said, or tried to. She had cleared her afternoon, she brought groceries, she read my discharge instructions before I'd even gotten home. She was here. I paused. "You were at Brookside Mall." My mother was quiet for a long time. Then she said, "And this is the sentence I have thought about more than any other in the months since. Marin, you have always been so capable. We never worried about you." I looked at her. "That's not a compliment," I said quietly. "That's an explanation." She left 40 minutes later without resolving anything. My father came that evening. He is a retired civil engineer, and he has the civil engineer's approach to all problems, including emotional ones, which is to establish a correct structural answer and then be baffled when the other parties don't immediately accept it. He sat at my kitchen table in the same chair my mother had used and told me, with genuine bewilderment, that I was overreacting. "These things happen in families," he said. "You can't blow up a relationship over one bad day." "It wasn't one bad day," I said. "It was one bad day in a pattern I've been counting for 15 years, he shifted. He is not a man who responds well to precision in arguments, which is ironic, given his profession. Then he said the thing that ended everything. "If something happened to you, that money should go to your sister. She'll need it more. Need, not deserve, not earn, just need." As though my death were a resource to be allocated according to who had demonstrated the most financial helplessness. As though the purpose of my life insurance was to solve Tess's problems. As though I were infrastructure even in death. I felt very calm. "That's exactly why I'm done," I said. He looked at me. "With this pattern," I clarified. "With being the reliable one, while everyone else is the important one. With subsidizing lives that don't consider mine worth showing up for." I looked at him steadily. "I love you, but I will not keep paying to be invisible." He left without another word. I cried after he went, sitting on the couch with the ice pack on my abdomen, not making any sound, just tears running down quietly. The way they do when you're not sad exactly, but something old and heavy is finally leaving the body. I spoke to a therapist for the first time the following week. Dr. Constance Webb had been in private practice for 19 years, with a specialty in family systems and what she called invisible child dynamics, the patterns that develop in families where one child's needs are chronically deprioritized in service of another's. She had the calm, neutral affect of someone who had heard everything and still found the human capacity for damage surprising enough to stay engaged. She did not tell me I was overreacting. She handed me a term, parentified child, not in the clinical sense of a child forced into parental roles, but in the softer, more insidious sense. A child who learns to manage their own needs quietly so that the family system can function without friction. The moment you asked for something real, she said, and it wasn't given, the policy change makes complete sense. You were updating your understanding of the relationship to match the evidence. My father said I was overreacting, I said. People who benefit from your compliance often will, she said. That doesn't make them right. I went every Thursday for 3 months. My Aunt Carol called on a Wednesday afternoon, 6 days after my conversation with my parents. Aunt Carol is my father's older sister, and she has the gene for blunt clarity that my father received only in the civil engineering version. She called me on my cell phone, without warning, and said, "Your parents told me what happened. Both versions. I want you to know I've heard the real one." "What did they say?" I asked. "Your mother said you've been acting volatile since the surgery. Your father said you've been influenced by Leah." She paused. "I'd like to know what you say." I told her everything. The taxi, the thumbs up emoji, the don't make a scene, the voicemail, the small stomach thing, the call from Tessa asking about insurance. Aunt Cara listened without interrupting. When I finished, there was a long silence. "I've watched this pattern for 30 years, she said finally. "From the outside, your grandmother saw it before she died. We used to talk about it. Why didn't anyone say something?" "Because your parents would have called it interference," she said. "And because you never ask." She paused again. "You're asking now." "I'm not sure I'm asking," I said. "I think I'm just done." "That's also a valid answer," she said. She called my parents the following week. I don't know exactly what was said, but my mother phoned me afterward with the particular energy of someone who has been told something they already knew but had successfully avoided acknowledging. "I wasn't there for you," she said. It was the first sentence she'd said to me in 2 weeks that was about me. "No," I agreed. "You weren't." "I don't know how to fix it," she said. "You start by not calling it a small stomach thing," I said. 3 weeks passed. The stitches dissolved. The soreness faded to occasional stiffness. I returned to the office in person, fielded the politely curious questions from co-workers about my absence, and resumed the ordinary rhythms of my life. The family group chat was quiet. No birthday updates, no shared articles, no peripheral connection. It was the loudest silence I had ever experienced. It also, I realized slowly, had been doing something to me for years. That constant ambient noise of a family dynamics that required management. Its absence was strange at first, then it wasn't. Then it started to feel like the space where a low-grade headache had been. Leah came for dinner on a Friday, and we sat at my kitchen table and ate pasta, and talked for 3 hours about things that had nothing to do with my family or her family or insurance policy. Policies. At the end of the evening, she said, "You seem different." "I feel different," I said. "Lighter?" "Exhausted," I said. "But the good kind?" She laughed. Then, when she was putting on her coat, "You know this might not fix anything, right? Your parents might not change. Tessa might stay exactly who she is." "I know," I said, "and you're doing it anyway." "It was never about fixing them," I said. It was about being honest with myself. Tessa called on a Thursday evening in October, 6 weeks after the surgery. I almost didn't answer, but there was something different in the rhythm of the call. Not the rapid, slightly frantic quality of her calls when she wants something, but a slower, more hesitant thing. I answered, "Mom's in the hospital," she said. "She's okay. It's her blood pressure. They're just monitoring her overnight. But I've been sitting in this waiting room for 2 hours and She stopped. "I'll come," I said. "No, you don't have to. I just needed to call someone." I sat with that. "Maren," she said, "I think I've been very selfish." The silence between us was long and real. "I know I have," she said. "I knew it before this. Nobody ever made it matter. You always just—" She didn't finish the sentence. "Absorbed it," I said. "Yeah," she said quietly. "I don't want to anymore," I said. "I know. I need you to hear that. Not as a threat, just as a fact." "I hear it," she said. And for the first time in maybe ever, I believed she did. I went to the hospital. Not because everything was fine, but because my mother was sick, and I am not built for abandonment, even when the people involved haven't yet earned my presence. My mother looked small in the hospital bed. Not diminished. She is not a woman who diminishes easily, but rearranged. The usual certainty that carries her through rooms had quieted a little. She looked at me when I came in, and something moved across her face that I recognized as the specific emotion people feel when they realize, too late, that they have been taking something for granted. "You came," she said. "Of course I came," I said. That was true, and it was also a sentence that contained everything I wanted to say. That showing up is not optional. That family is not a name on a paper, but a practice. That I had been practicing for 31 years, and I needed someone else to start. She was discharged the next morning. Blood pressure managed, medication adjusted, nothing critical. My father shook my hand in the parking lot, which is his version of a hug. Things did not fix overnight. They didn't fix in weeks either. The apologies when they came were imperfect. My mother's were too wordy, full of context and caveats, and the slight defensive quality of someone who needs you to understand why they did the thing before they apologized for doing it. My father's were too brief, the verbal equivalent of clearing a table rather than cleaning it. But they came. And I, who had expected nothing, found I was capable of receiving something. Tessa started texting differently, slower, more questions, less performance. She asked how I was sleeping, whether my scar had faded, whether I'd ever gone back to the hiking trail where I'd first felt the pain that turned out to be the cyst. "Not yet," I told her. "Maybe in spring." "Can I come?" she asked. I thought about it. "Maybe," I said. Months later, she asked if she'd ever be my beneficiary again. We were sitting in my kitchen, which is the room where most of the real conversations in my life have happened. She wrapped both hands around her coffee mug the way she does when she's being careful with something. "Maybe," I said, "but not because of the money. Only if what we build isn't based on what happens to me." She was quiet. Then she nodded, and that was enough. Tom Garrity confirmed the beneficiary change was finalized on a Tuesday morning in late September. He sent a 1-page document and a brief note. "Policy updated per your request. Please retain for your records." I filed it in the folder labeled Insurance, which lives in the second drawer of my home office filing cabinet, which is organized by category and alphabetized within each category, because that is the kind of person I am. I am the reliable one. I will probably always be in some form, but there is a difference, I understand now, between being reliable and being invisible, between being the person your family counts on and being the person your family does not count. I had been both for a very long time, and I had confused them, and the confusion had cost me years of quiet, and a surgery I should have gotten ahead of weeks earlier, because I had learned too well to ignore what hurt. Dr. Webb, in our last session, said something I've turned over many times since. People like you, she said, are often mistaken for people who don't need anything. The mistake is usually made by the people closest to you. And what's the correction? I asked. Needing things in plain sight, she said, until the people who love you learn to see them. I'm still practicing that. I'm slower to absorb now, quicker to name things. I have said that hurt more times in the last year than in the entire decade before it, and the sky has not fallen, and my mother has not collapsed, and my father has not disowned me, and Tessa is becoming, incrementally and imperfectly, someone I might actually be close to. The townhouse still needs repainting in the living room. The HOA sent a letter about my gutters in October. I have a follow-up with Dr. Whitmore in January, and he says the scar tissue is minimal and there's no indication of recurrence. I am fine. And this time, when I say it, I mean it fully. The biggest change wasn't the policy. I know that now. The biggest change was the moment outside St. Luke's Medical Centre, when I sat on a bench with 3 stitches and a paper bag full of prescriptions, and I listened to the bright, distracted voice of my mother say, "You'll have to take a bus." And instead of filing that away in the same place, I had filed the co-signed lease and the dental bill and the graduation she missed. I finally let it mean what it meant. Not with anger, with clarity. Because clarity, I've learned, is the thing they don't want you to have. It's harder to absorb someone's choices when you can see them precisely. It's harder to subsidize a pattern when you've finally named it. It's harder to keep holding things together when you've understood, for the first time, the weight of what you've been carrying and the fact that nobody else was going to carry it with you. I took the taxi. I changed the policy. I stopped being fine when I wasn't. And eventually, imperfectly, slowly, in the particular way that real things change, my family started seeing me clearly. For the first time in 31 years, I let them.